All right. Hello, everyone. This is Trip. I'm here with Nick and Alan, the man of the West, who is going to be kicking things off with us for a little online summit exploring Tolkien religion and beyond. Because we mostly want to hang out with Alan, and I will be giving you the reverse treatment. Having podcasted for 15 years, every time, even this past weekend, I was speaking, doing the podcast live with a bunch of fresh beer and in Missouri, and then people come up and do this number. And you're like, oh, what, is something wrong? And they're like, I've been listening to you for years. Can I have a selfie? Or remember that one time where you said this? And
I'm about someone who gets that and says, no, I don't remember.
And I'm like, nah, but finally I get to creep someone out because I've listened to them too much, and it's you.
All right, then.
But first, man, I just want to tell everyone very briefly, if you're in the group, you'll be getting emails each morning or after I wake up that'll give you links to join everything live. The schedule is on the resource page. Some of them are live like this, where we'll be able to interact. Some that are lectures, people pre-record because they want to make sure they know their lecture, but they'll stream live and you can interact in the chat. A number of the people that even pre-recorded their lectures are going to be there to interact with it. If not, we're collecting questions, and then we'll use them in some of the live sessions for Q&A. But the other thing to remember is if you can't join for all of it, don't worry. The videos will be on the page right after, and once my kids go to bed and the audio is processed, you can download the MP3. So you can connect in all those ways. This is the second time we've done something Tolkien. So I'm going to let Nick explain what's going on, because I have a philosophy of religion PhD and just love reading Tolkien. But Nick has a giant beard and,
I was going to say, we've got 3 different stages of beard going on here.
It's true.
Congratulations, Nick. You win.
Yeah. I mean, I just see it as like the trinity of facial hair right now. I feel like really excited.
It's thin enough that it's the Holy Ghost.
So does that make me the body? Yeah, we're getting blasphemous.
I know we are. I'm just like lightning rod. All right, we're good.
So speaking of blasphemy, and podcast creeping out.
Yeah.
Blasphemy. Sorry. Yeah. So I've listened to Trip for a long time as well. And when the Rings of Power came out, reached out to Trip, and he was like, hey, let's do a Tolkien class. And I reached out to him. We connected, did an intro to Tolkien class, and people said they wanted more. So we're kicking around doing Tolkien, spirituality, religion, and Trip and I put together this idea for Interchanging Melodies, which is to kind of move into a diverse religious space, because the Tolkien community is made up of a bunch of different people, religious and a-religious alike. And so we ended up reaching out to people based on that. So that is what we're talking about: religious, post-religious, non-religious things. And we're honored to have Alan you here as our first guest. And I think going back to the podcast thing, I met you in Nashville for the first time when you were at a podcast conference. Hung out with you and Marie. And I remember asking you, I was like, did you grow up Nazarene? And
that's right, we talked about that. I remember
we had a Nazarene connection. So anyway, I'll have to tell you, and then we'll move on to the actual interview. But I remember hearing you for the first time on the podcast, and I heard you say like, yeah, I don't drink, back in like the first or second season.
Immediately, yeah.
And I was like, okay, interesting. And then you said means of grace. And I was like, doesn't drink, means of grace. This dude is absolutely Nazarene.
Yeah.
And so,
oh man, I think I went to Point Loma Nazarene College, and I grew up as a young, in my teenage years in a Nazarene church. So yeah.
I'm just happy that one of my favorite podcasters and people in the Tolkien community is also a recovering Nazarene. It just, makes the world feel a little less lonely,
Yeah.
So, yeah. So from there, Alan, so taking a note from the Prancing Pony podcast,
Okay.
When and how did you first discover Tolkien's work? And what was your experience like, and what keeps you coming back?
Well, let's see. My very first experience would have been when I was 9. Yeah, I would have been 9 years old, because it would have been Thanksgiving in 1977 when the Rankin Bass animated Hobbit released on TV. I saw that. I wanted the book, and in fact, I think, if I'm allowed to do this,
show and tell's permitted.
This is the very first Tolkien book that I ever received. It is the Hobbit in softback, completely falling apart. If I start flipping the pages, they'll fly out. And it's just the soft cover, beat up edition. But all the stills, all the illustrations in the book are from the Rankin Bass animated film in 1977. Thankfully, I eventually discovered that there was a lot more than that Rankin Bass film. Because, well, we'll get to that at some other point. But what kept me coming back was the book. Right, I got to the book in 78, and absolutely fell in love with The Hobbit. Unlike most books, there's nothing at the back that says, if you like this, you might want to buy The Lord of the Rings or something like that. There was nothing like buy the author. I had no idea who this guy was. There's no internet. I didn't really ask anybody at my library. I didn't even think about it. But then, so that was 9. So like 5 years later, I'm in high school, freshman, and a friend of mine introduces me to The Lord of the Rings. And from there, it was all over. I read, I bought a box set of the books immediately and devoured them probably in the span of a couple of weeks, read all 3, and then just kept reading them, and it became, like a lot of things when you're a teenager, sort of an obsession. If you look at my Peachy folders back in the day, there's a lot of dwarven runes and things along those lines, as I was, playing around with all the different, world building elements of the story. And it just became a story, a really inspiring story for a long time. But what's kept me coming back is the depth of it. The fact that every single time, without fail, that I read anything from Tolkien, I learn something more, no matter how many times I've read it before. I didn't go into this podcast thinking I'd learn more. I've learned more in the last 7 years than I'd learned in everything else combined before that. Just because that's the way it works with Tolkien. The deeper you dive, the more you learn. So that's what's kept me coming back.
Mm-hmm. One of the things about the Prancing Pony podcast, and for those that might be new to it, you should definitely check it out. But just know it's dangerous to start, because there's a lot of episodes and you could end up going backwards in time.
Yes.
I think I found your podcast probably 4 years ago or so.
Okay.
But during lockdown.
Yeah.
And I was in Scotland, so lockdown lasted quite a bit longer than in most of the United States. I would go on walks, because that was the only, we could either go to get food or medicine or the doctor. Otherwise, you weren't supposed to go, out of your house. You could go for a walk. So I would go and listen to the section for the podcast for the week, and with the new audio edition.
Yeah.
With Andy's circus reading, and then listen to the Prancing Pony episode.
Smart.
And,
I like that combination.
And I felt like by the end of it, I was like, I just want to go hang out with them, And I think that's one of the things podcasts do, because it's going into your ear, that then it's like, if you are into whatever that podcast is about, and now there are these other people that love it as much as you do, then you're like, oh, we have an instant connection.
Yeah, absolutely. You feel like you made a friend. It's that way when I listen to podcasts too. Same thing.
Yeah, and but one of the other bits about Tolkien is it's like we have a shared friend that none of us have met.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear, like, you talked about meeting Tolkien, but when was it where you realized that these weren't just like cool books, or like, oh, I really like those movies, but I'm going to rewatch the extended editions every Christmas. I'm going to read through blah, 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 blah. Like, when did Tolkien go to like the lifelong friend I've never met, but I'm going to read it and hang out with people that do?
Oh, goodness. I think I was 19 when I managed to read the Silmarillion for the first time. And, my co-host, Sean Marchese, the Lord of the Mark, he read it when he was 12, but then again, he's, brilliant. So he read that when I read it when I was 19, and I barely grasped it, you know, and I just kept diving back in and diving back in. And that was probably the beginning of when I knew it was going to become more of a lifelong passion. But I'll tell you what it really was when I realized, you know, this is the friend I never met, was when I finally got the letters for the first time. And I read the letters cover to cover. And I felt like I got to know this guy kind of unfairly, right? I mean, you know, all one-sided, but I'm getting to read his words to his family, to his friends, to total strangers, to his publisher. And you start to see so many dots get connected, and you feel this personal connection with a guy who was generous enough to share this gift with the world. And I think ever since then, I've just felt like, man, this is the guy, you know. If I could be half as good as he is at any of the things that he was good at, I'll be very satisfied with my life.
Man, you know, I think that probably people who are watching this, and I think Tripp and I would agree that what you said rings true. Like, you know, you talked about anytime you read Tolkien, no matter if it's just kind of fandom or if you want to go super deep into the history of Middle Earth, like it keeps bringing you back. Yeah. And kind of the same thing. When I read Lord of the Rings for the first time, there was just something that like shifted or connected like in my life where I was like, I don't, you know, like you said, it's hard to put words to it, but it changes like the trajectory of your life to a certain degree, you know,
changes your perspective on things. Definitely.
And I think like you've talked about on the podcast, like when you hang out with Tolkien people because they get it, you know, it's hard to find. Yeah. They're the best. Really and it's hard to find people that understand that sort of, I guess, just profundity of an author, you know.
Boy, that's a good way of putting it. Profundity indeed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you know, as you grew up and, you know, got connected to Tolkien's works, all that good stuff, started becoming a super nerd, you know.
Might have been a nerd even before I knew who Tolkien was. It's perfectly fair to make that allegation.
Here's the thing. You elevated your nerdness. You elevated it.
That is true. I have raised the game.
So, you know, we as people have like all these complicated, we're very complex, right? We grow up in different cultures. We have a multitude of fandoms. And so a lot of us come from faith backgrounds. And I know that you came from a faith background, a Christian environment.
Right.
And so did Tolkien's work have an effect on your spiritual life during the beginning of your Tolkien journey? And if so, how did those things converge early on in your life?
Probably not very early on. I mean, you know, my first experience was as a 9-year-old reading The Hobbit, so I wasn't connecting that with like the Arminian theology of the Nazarene Church. I mean, it wasn't a thing that was connecting at all. I don't know. The Lord of the Rings might have in a very subconscious sort of way, because it really reflected a lot of the values that, well, not just Christianity, but really most mainstream religions teach. You know, honesty and faithfulness and fellowship and kindness and generosity and sacrifice. I mean, all of these themes that resonate with everybody, regardless of their religious or irreligious backgrounds. But, you know, given the context that I was in, of course, it sort of echoed those things. So subconsciously, probably. But I think the first time I started to see the Lord of the Rings, or to see all of the Legendarium through any sort of theological light or lens, was when I read the Silmarillion as a freshman or sophomore in college. And I was at Point Loma, so it was, you know, I was already sort of steeped in that tradition. And, you know, I knew that Tolkien was a Catholic, but, you know, here I am reading this beautiful story of the creation of the universe. And I couldn't help but notice the echoes and parallels with, you know, what I knew, you know, what I was taught to believe was the beginning of the universe. So it was fantastic. And I think that's when I started to kind of piece together some things. But I was always careful because I took Tolkien's words pretty seriously. I'm not one of these death of the author people. If Tolkien said it, you know, I'm going to go with that. So when he says in the prologue that he's, you know, has a cordial dislike of allegory and that he never meant for this to be allegorical, I believe that. And so I might see some parallels, I might see some connections, but I'm not going to go so far as to say, well, Tolkien said this and that is exactly this thing. And yeah, so, but yeah, I would say probably around the time of the Silmarillion was when that converged a little bit with my faith journey at the time.
Yeah.
You mentioned that reading the Silmarillion, and when I teach philosophy of religion to undergrad students, if you start by picking particular religions, then you always have someone in the class that's their like home base, and then it's like talking about their mom.
You got to be super careful at that point, don't you?
And then others might have like a dumb version of it or underinformed version of that religious tradition, or they might think that their experience in it is universal, and you're like, no, there's 2 billion of them, and
that's a fair point. Yeah.
But one of the things that when you're doing a PhD in religion and a philosophy in religion, one of the things that comes to the fore is that each tradition actually has a giant cosmology. Like a religious tradition has a thick account of reality that then we ask these questions of origin and meaning and purpose and what is the future.
Big questions,
all these big ones that humans have asked around the campfire forever. And I found like if you introduce those questions with Tolkien, like everyone has some familiarity, some are super nerds, but it's only the ones that love the Silmarillion that treat it like their mom. Like they start to get defensive. But for me, it was reading that where then I realized these aren't just like beautiful stories that capture the nature of friendship and all these things that I love. It's also giving a rich account of the world and then asking us, well, what if this is our past? What if to understand ourselves, we enter this world? And I think in that case, it becomes a place where those of us from different traditions and whatever our relationship we have with them now, it becomes a place that we can playfully ask those big questions humans have asked forever around campfires.
Absolutely. He asks some of the toughest questions, or if he doesn't ask them directly, he certainly creates the environment and builds a rich base of soil for those questions to take root. Everything from not just the beginning of time, but the nature of evil, and there's so many wonderful, difficult questions, fate and free will, theosophy. I mean, it's all there, and you're right. People from different faith backgrounds can come to it, because even though Tolkien had his own specific belief and wrote it in a way, I'm trying to remember the quote in the letter where he wanted it to be consistent or believable by somebody who also believes in the Trinity, was sort of his standard. Which is why he eventually went back on, let's say, direct reincarnation and rewrote the idea of the elves being a little bit more, consistent with what he would personally believe. But even though he did sort of create those outer bounds of the story, he never made it, a requirement that it fit that one particular narrow niche. And I'm so glad, because it's meant that the world is open to everybody, regardless.
Yeah. The language I've used when talking about it is that he wanted to resonate with his confessional tradition without it being collapsed into it.
Exactly.
And by the end of the semester, my goal is always that undergrad students realize, like wisdom that's real wisdom that goes down deep, you can actually find resonance with people across different traditions. And you don't have to collapse everyone into yours to recognize beauty posed and framed well. Because so many of those traditions have lived apart from each other for a long time. What happens when you actually get to hang out and learn from each other rather than dominate? And I think Tolkien helps us think about that, even though in his mind he's just talking about the legendarium and his own faith.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, fantastic stuff.
Yeah, and fantasy, and I think a lot of people begin with Tolkien where it's like the sandbox to play with those ideas and hang out with people without getting, for the most part, shamed or whatever. You got a few gatekeepers and things like that, just like any other fandom. But
I probably fell into that group as recently as 10 years ago. I was probably a little bit too gatekeepery. Just it might have been the Hobbit film that threw me off. In fairness.
The Hobbit film that threw a lot of people off.
Yeah, that might have made me a little more of a gatekeeper for a bit. Yeah. Now I'm okay. However you come to the fandom, you come to the fandom. That's all.
Yeah, I feel like that's just part of, deepening your fandom, or, I feel like people, once they realize, that there's a standard, and then you're like, people don't meet the standard, or if you have family members who, read Lord of the Rings to you growing up, and they're like, I loved The Hobbit. You're like, how dare you? You lied to me, But once you get past it and start accepting people, it becomes okay. But
absolutely.
I think people though in like a community, they have a desire to talk about those things. And I think that seeing Tolkien explore those big, deep questions, in the history of Middle Earth, especially later, as he tried to make his legendary more consistent with his own metaphysics, Like, I think people are hungry for that. And I think that's partially why, the Prancing Pony is so popular. But like in this age where like people are looking for that, like, why do you think that, like, I'm just asking for your musings on why you think that people have such a deep desire for that and find Tolkien a safe haven to explore this and hang out with people.
Ooh. Well, I think for one thing, I'll almost answer it backwards. The hanging out with the Tolkien people is because of all the fandoms I've encountered, at least. I know this is anecdotal evidence, but the Tolkien audience has certainly, up until the Rings of Power, been the most open-minded and most accepting of people in the fandom, regardless of where you come from, regardless of your race, religion, gender, any of that. I know that the Rings of Power and the controversy stirred by that has pulled some people out of the woodwork, but I think most of us would agree that the loudest voices doing that aren't and have not been part of the Tolkien fandom, and they won't be part of the Tolkien fandom in a few years. They're just controversy tourists. They're anger merchants, as I've often called them. And they make their living doing that, so that's fine. Go do that. But for the most part, the Tolkien fandom is the best fandom I've ever encountered, whether that's the Star Wars fandom, whether it's professional sports fandoms, whether it's I used to play Magic the Gathering a lot, and I know that's still a big thing, especially now with Lord of the Rings coming back into it. I might have to play again. 40K, which I used to play a lot of Warhammer 40K. There's a fandom there. There's fandoms everywhere. Far and away, the Tolkien fandom is the best. So I think there's one of the reasons is that the people that are part of the Tolkien fandom are generally good people. So that makes it more inviting and more welcoming for people. But I think in terms of like the themes of Tolkien, we talk about how, they may have been consistent with his own religious beliefs, but the fact is these are universal truths. So many of these are absolutely universal truths. They are not dependent on a faith. Not only are they not dependent on having a specific faith background or specific worldview, they're not dependent on having any faith at all. You might be completely irreligious. You might be complete atheistic, and that's fine. You can still come to these truths because they are universal truths for the most part. Everything from, fellowship and sacrifice for others and genuine love that is, just deep. And I'm struggling because there's so many different themes, but I mean, everybody's always wondered about fate and free will. It doesn't matter what your religious belief is. Fate and free will is a big question. Are we predetermined for certain things? Do we make our own decisions? Do those decisions have any actual consequences, or are those things going to happen anyway? Those are big questions. The nature of evil. If you are at least theistic, I suppose if you're atheistic, you don't have to really address that question as much. But if you are theistic of any kind, you've got to wonder, how can any sort of God allow those evil things to happen? And so a thought system develops around that, and Tolkien addresses it and gives you glimpses and ideas of his own beliefs, but without forcing them on you. So I think it's that and I don't know how much he intended to do that, but he created a world in which multiple worldviews can find themselves. And I think that, combined with the general warmth of the Tolkien audience, is exactly why it's become such a wonderful fandom as a whole.
One of the things about one of the perks of having a world that has almost no religion that as we normally categorize it in it, is that then the to engage the world and your point in it with faith doesn't come with all the baggage or particular beliefs of any tradition.
Exactly.
And so I think but if we ask Tolkien, or are you able to look at history as it's like reduced and determined by kind of mechanistic science? He's going to go, no, we're against that. We're against that. And so in some sense, Middle Earth tells you a thick account of the world, but it's not explicitly ours. So you aren't debating the particularities of belief, but it is saying, no. Like I want you to have the courage to live in faith with your finitude where you find yourself. And guess what the best thing to do with it is? To love your friends deeply, to know yourself truly by sacrificing for others, to value your pipe and a pint with a friend over. Like if you just start going through it all, like at that moment you just see like Lao Tzu, Socrates, Jesus, and the Buddha going, like they all are nodding. And so I actually think that's one of the perks of like as opposed to something like Game of Thrones, where religion plays all the roles that are like the worst expressions of religion in our time. You take it out, But it's still a world that says part of the task of being human, right, is like Frodo, you don't get to pick where you found yourself, but you get to decide what you do with it. Exactly. Or like, anyway, so it's that by separating faith from belief, you can have a non-religious or a religious invitation to faith in Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely, you can. Yeah. And that's true throughout. I mean, I know Lord of the Rings, he made very explicitly, irreligious. I mean, no trappings of religion at all. The closest we get is Faramir looking to the west before they have dinner. That's it. Yeah, there's a little bit more in the Silmarillion. You learn a little bit about festivals, and in Akadabeth, you read about what they did on the Mental Tarma once a year and all of that. But even then, it's really as non-sectarian as it gets. And he was very explicit in trying to keep it that way. I think it is, but more of it sneaks through as you get into History of Middle Earth, and you start to see. I think like the Afterbeth is a really, really good place to see some more of his, expression of his personal beliefs in terms of the afterlife and things. But he wrote stuff that's really, you remember, think about the letters and the fact that he would get letters from people who were kind of ticked because he wasn't explicit, or because he wrote things that they didn't understand. Like, the owner or the manager of that Catholic bookstore, I think it was Hastings, wrote in and was like, how, you're talking about reincarnation, and what do you mean Tom Bombadil is the one, or the master, or no, he is, right? So Goldberry says, who is Tom? Oh, he is. And so he takes that to be some sort of statement of theistic nature, and no. And Tolkien was very quick to correct that. So yeah, I come back to Tolkien's ability to write it in a way that was consistent with his own beliefs, which I can, totally appreciate, and yet at the same time not make it to where we all had to share the same worldview.
Yeah. I think, like you said, when people are asking those pointed questions like Hastings, like Tolkien's like, you're missing the point. Because, like I've seen Trip. I knew that when you were talking about capital T truths, Alan, that he was going to go on and talk about friendship and fellowship and stuff. And,
Trip, the beer, fighting the mug.
That's right. And Trip I've heard him talk about religion very passionately and different beliefs with, just in, articulating a different worldview that might be more healing for some people. But I think that even I've seen you on your podcast, and even me and Trip, like what makes us cry and moves us is like the stories and the scenes in Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Like it doesn't, like we can have fun and nerd out about the ontological properties of Iluvatar all day. But it's probably not going to move us to tears,
No, the moving us to tears. I mean, I'm thinking of, I'll just tell you right now, the first thing that comes to my mind, I'm doing, because besides the Prancing Pony podcast, I also just started today's Tolkien Times, short format show. It's also on YouTube. And one of the days is Silmarillion Saturdays. And I just finished a reading of basically Hurin's tale. So I started, in 1 week, it was his face off, the Aure and Tulava, and the, finally getting bound and taken off to Angband. And then there was a day where, and these are all still coming out, folks. So I think that one's out, but the next one is his words with Morgoth. But the thing that broke me was the following week as I was reading for that. And it's when he comes back and he encounters Morwen. And that, I mean, even just thinking about that brings tears to my eyes. It's those stories, those characters and those moments that just get to you. And it's not, the philosophy and and all of that wonderful stuff, which is a lot of fun, but isn't the point.
But we could just judge people that think Balrogs have wings, right?
Oh, we absolutely
no 100%. No doubt.
So one of the things that I had a student do their presentation in a class, it was called Pop Gods. It was a philosophy and culture class on the Prancing Pony podcast, and as a postmodern form of sacred reading, right? So most religious traditions and at some point over the course of the 4th or 5th century end up with texts that function authoritatively, and as the elite class, as literacy expands outside their elite class, then reading and interpreting becomes sacred across religious traditions. And we had looked at, like, well, they all do it. So, like, what does it mean to take a text seriously where both it is addressing you and you're addressing it and this kind of thing? How do you do it in community? And they did their presentation that Prancing Pony podcast was doing sacred reading of Tolkien. And I thought, that's 100% true. And I had never thought of it.
I don't think I'd ever thought of it.
I was like, this 20-year-old just got themselves an A.
Yeah.
And that she messaged me saying, "Oh, you're talking to Alan. Ask him the passage that he's come to so far that because you're talking about getting back to doing the Silmarillion at some point. Maybe we'll come back to these.
Yeah.
Like if you think 6 or 7 years ahead, what's the passage that you can't wait to talk to again because the community's bigger than last time, because you've read through the tradition again, in a sense, like like you're going, oh, anyway, like kind of like your build up for I am no man moment this time.
Yeah. I think it might be that Auri and Tuliva moment. That is one of my all-time favorite moments in the entire Legendarium. And when we do get to the Silmarillion a second time, I think I could honestly spend an entire episode just talking about what that means. The day shall come again. The night is passing. If I have to pick one passage right now, it's going to be that one. That is central, I think, in my mind, to what keeps us going and what keeps me going, honestly, in doing the show. I mean, I don't say this very often, but it is hard. It is hard work. It didn't start out that way. It started out as a passion project, as a little bit of a hobby, and it has become a living, but it has also become work. And I'm always trying to balance that. This is still passion. This is still my love. This is still what I want to do, and how lucky I am that I get to do this, and essentially almost completely full time. But it is hard, and something like that reminds me of why I keep doing it. Auri and Tuliva.
Yeah. Man, and I think, gosh, just I love, I think everyone has those favorite passages. We probably have multiple where you talk about.
Oh yeah, I could pick another half dozen easy, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Yeah, no doubt. And and you were talking about as the community grows, as we share these passages and have, as we passionately do, other people are like, wait, I don't even think I thought about it that way. I heard it like that, or it struck me that way.
I love that.
And then when they do, they go back and they might feel it a similar way, or it resonates a similar way that you shared, or, they find their own and share it with somebody else. But, this is, as you're thinking about the community as it's growing, and as you have that passion, try to balance between like passion as well as work, you've also got a multitude of fans from different places coming, and from diverse religious, cultural backgrounds, etc. So like when you think about that, like how does that influence the way that you read Tolkien, participate in the fandom, and even maybe work on the Rings of Power wrap up, today's Tolkien Times, Prancing podcast, etc.
It really has changed my viewpoint, if you will. I think, I still stand by a lot of what I said in season 1 as we went through the text of the Silmarillion. It's not like I'm like, oh, I looked at that through a totally wrong lens. But I'll tell you what, over the years, as I've gotten to know more and more people from different faith backgrounds, or people who don't have religion, at all, people who are from different countries, different, different everything, different worldviews, different, a large LGBTQ audience as well. I've become more sensitive to issues of representation, more sensitive to issues of gender, more sensitive to issues of race, and that's only a good thing. I see that as being like, look, I'm not going to change necessarily the way I read Tolkien, right? I'm going to always read Sam and Frodo as Sam and Frodo in my mind, but I'm no longer. How do I say this? I no longer look at somebody who's reading them as a romantic homosexual couple. I'm no longer looking at them askance and thinking, well, how dare you? That's fine. Your experience with the text is your experience with the text. And, I may not have that same experience, and that's fine. But somebody else's reading of the text is no less valid than mine. And I think that's one thing that being exposed to a really broad fandom in terms of like all of those characteristics, everything from, age to gender to nationality to religion to everything. That's really been a blessing to me. It's been a huge help to get me outside myself and outside my own world experience. And it's just been fantastic. I mean, I think back just to this last season and having 9 different co-hosts other than Sean Marchese, and every one of them had some sort of different perspective. I know some of them were, very similar to me in the sense that they were, white cis males, of similar age, but not everybody was. And it was really nice and refreshing to get viewpoints from people from different cultures, different belief systems, different genders, different everything. And I absolutely love that about the fandom. I love that it brings that many people together, because I'll tell you what, in today's world, which is more and more polarized every day, all it takes is 5 minutes on social media to just get your brain hurting. The Tolkien community welcomes everybody. And I love that. Absolutely love that. And that's, I think, what the experience of the fandom has brought for me. Yeah.
Well, it would be kind of like, breaking rank with the very heart of the Legendarium if you didn't, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. That's the point. I'm starting to realize, oh yeah, wow, these narrower viewpoints I had before were wrong.
You're like, no, you can have elves and dwarves.
Well, no. I draw my line at Keeley and Tauriel.
Well,
and Balrog wings. How dare you? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, and I think that there is a shift, right, where you shift from this text matters to me, so I want to learn how to read it right, and then I want to tell other people how to read it right. To this text, I love this text, and I can't wait to wrestle with this text. And yes. I love it when other people love this text and they wrestle with this text. Absolutely. And it is a hermeneutical disposition, if you want to.
Wow.
See, I still haven't paid off my student loans, but the way in which you interpret. But like one looks at a text and wants certainty and finality, and one sees the text as the very place you encounter yourself again and are opened up, and you might 100%. Meet the other. And whatever place you learn to do that well, it can actually be transferred to the people around you, right? And I think that's one of the things you see in the Tolkien community, is that kind of like what is it that stares the power of the One Ring in the face? Is like a rather odd group of people who don't start out liking each other, and at the end, they do. Yeah, and they're ready to die for each other, and maybe even share a pipe with a friend whose one got broke, and all that kind of stuff. And so it is a wild. So, now, I have to admit, I was one of those people that was real worried when the OG co-hosts of the Prancing Pony podcast broke up.
That's a fair thing to be worried about. I was worried too,
and
I really was.
And so here's a 2-part question. One is like y'all weren't besties when you started, and then you've met a bigger Tolkien community, and they showed up and were also your friends. That's what made it okay for me. But like, how has being connected with people who constantly are wrestling with these texts, how has that helped you discover new ways of making friends beyond the normal bounds most of us adults do, like the people you work with, the people that are on your same sports team, or and this kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think I sort of already had a lot of practice in that, because I've been doing my own thing for a number of years. So you talk about workplace, and workplace friends are really pretty common. That's where you develop a lot of really good friendships. But I haven't worked in a corporate office or an office of any kind since I think 2006.
You were ready for COVID.
Yeah, I really was, because in 2006 is when I transitioned from working in a corporate environment to taking my photography full time. At the time, I was doing architectural and product photography, and I did that for a very long time. I still do it, but COVID really killed that industry, at least for me, in terms of the architectural photography that I was doing as marketing work. And that's when I also, I'd also in 2015, so about a year or two before the podcast, got into voiceover work and started doing some narration and things along those lines. And I still do that quite a bit as well. But because of that, I've not had workplace friends. So I've already sort of, gotten ahead of the curve in terms of figuring out how to develop friendships, online with communities in, Discord or Facebook or whatever the case may be. But yeah, you're right. No, Sean and I didn't start out as besties. We started out as acquaintances from, a Facebook group, and we'd kept trying to one up each other. And one day after a VO coach told me, you need to be more conversational behind the mic. You sound a little newsreadery sometimes. And you can get more conversational if you start a podcast. Don't worry, nobody will listen. And so I was like, well, first of all, I'm not going to do this by myself. My goodness, I am not going to sit and talk solo for any length of time. And then here I am doing today's Tolkien Times anyway. So I wanted to do it with somebody else, mostly because I've been listening to the Tolkien Professor. And I'm like, I don't want to be some one guy going out there talking about Tolkien when there's already this one guy talking about Tolkien who has forgotten more than I'll ever know. He's got more knowledge in his little pinky than I've got in my whole body. So let's take a different approach. And I reached out to Sean, and the rest is history. We became very good friends over those years. So yeah, like you, I worried about the future of it as well. But, I think, talking about the community and developing friendships, that's what saved the show. I'd gotten an opportunity to meet so many other people in the Tolkien world that when it came time to, ring the bell and say, or to light the beacons and say, Minas Tirith beckons, please come help us out. They did in droves. I had to have, I think, 3 or 4 people as backups because I'd ran out of chapters to give people. And it is only because of those friendships. And to their credit, I thank Amazon for a lot of that, because I got to know most of these people, especially the ones from new media like TikTok, through the events that they brought us all to. But those friendships are what kept the show going, and I'm super happy for it. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Katie in the chat, definitely achieved that conversational tone, and I'll say
it took a while.
That's accurate.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I listened. Maybe y'all were like maybe 10 episodes into season 1 when I first got there.
Yeah.
Like
that's
where you guys, where you are now is it's unbelievable. You guys have really built something awesome. So
yeah, I look at that and I think, I don't know that we built it so much as it showed up. I mean, in all fairness, like we just did this show, and then, but obviously as it starts to develop, you figure out how can you create the right environment for it to develop even further. And that's become our passion. It's still about community building. And I can say that even for Sean, he may not be front and center anymore on the podcast, but we just finished writing our book, and it's very much about the community and welcoming people to it and introducing people to different corners of it. So yeah, it's still very much front of mind for both of us. That's become sort of the purpose for continuing.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Nick, you look like you're about to ask a question.
Well,
I mean, I can always ask you guys a question if you want. I'm sure I can come up with something.
No, I just was thinking about just reflecting on what you said about the community, and I love how you just responded and were like, it showed up, right? The podcast and the community, and even I'm thinking about your recent venture into TikTok, and how I think if
fun.
and how that probably wouldn't have happened if you hadn't met people like Don Marshall or
Don Marshall. Absolutely,
is that right?
I never would have been on. Yeah, Don and New Beta were the two kind of catalysts, but especially Don, to his credit, because he pulled me in one day. He was doing a live, and I jumped in and was chatting with him, and he tried to get me on. He's like, "Oh no, just join TikTok." So I joined TikTok because he was doing it simultaneously with some other platform. I don't remember which. And he goes, "No, come on, sign up on TikTok." So I signed up. And next thing you know, I'm on there now as well. I need to get back to providing some more content. Right now we're doing excerpts from the book on there, but yeah, it's been fun.
Well, we have a really important question we've asked a lot of Tolkien scholars. It's not like hot seat, like when
I'm not a scholar.
Okay. Well, you just
make sure we don't confuse
hundreds of hours
and all these others.
Alan, is this a cheesy game?
All right.
In middle school, in the back of a bus, you may have played like Kill, Marry, Screw. It's a Middle Earth version of this, where you get to pick any 3 characters from the Legendarium, but the categories are different.
No. Okay, good.
And we aren't expecting you to go John Garth, where he's like, "Let me give you answers for each of these for each age." Like you don't have to do that.
Of course you would do that. That's brilliant. Good job, John.
But you have to pick the if you're going to go to Pound Town at the Prancing Pony, and I know you're a recovering Nazarene, so like maybe they're the only one drinking, but the person you're going to be at the Prancing Pony with for an extended period of time, and hear all the best stories. So like the Prancing Pony partner right there. Then like you're at Helm's Deep, you're counting takedowns, and these are murder bot orcs. These aren't ones like Child of the Iluvatar orcs. These are non-ethically questionable orcs.
These are ones you can absolutely kill with no qualms.
Yeah. But if you got a partner up there, who do you want as your at Helm's Deep? Okay. And the third one, and you cannot pick Sam. Like is if you're just gonna walk into Mordor, who are you going with? So you going to Pound Town at the Prancing Pony,
gonna drink
Helm's Deep, and then going with you to Mordor. Anyone in the Legendarium, but Sam's cheating for Mordor. It's cheat code.
Oh, come on. Sam, and Sam. No. Let's see. Who would I... Okay. Give me a moment. I'm thinking.
And the people in the chat, y'all are more than welcome to tell us yours as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see those, and I won't steal your ideas as I sometimes do from our Discord when we're doing live recordings, as Katie can attest. Tom Bombadil would be an interesting guy to drink with. I think Tom Bombadil would be a lot of fun. First of all, I wonder if you could even get drunk, if he's even physically capable of it. Second, if he did,
you want to find out,
throw off his poetry, and I really want to try. I want to get him off his meter.
He's going to dance. He's going to dance.
Oh, he's absolutely going to dance, and he's going to take the attention away from me in that regard because I can't dance because I grew up Nazarene.
Oh, nice. Well played.
I wasn't allowed to, so therefore I can move my feet or I can move my hips. You can't move both. That reminds me, there's a great joke. After you get married, if you're Nazarene, they say, really watch out. You aren't supposed to have sex because it can lead to dancing.
Oh, so true.
Yeah. Ex-Nazarene here. So I'll just be real clear on that. All right. So yes, Tom Bombadil at the Prancing Pony. I think that would be hilariously entertaining. Goldberry might have to rein him in from time to time. That's okay. I don't mind if she's there. That would actually add to the flavor. Who am I going to pick to go through the murder bot orcs at Helm's Deep? Oh man, I gotta say, but it can be anybody from the Legendarium. It doesn't have to be anybody who was alive at the time.
Right. It could anyone from the Legendarium.
Oh. Hurin. 100% Hurin.
Yeah.
There's nobody else. I'm taking Hurin for that one. Who is going to go into Mordor with me? You know, it's funny. We've asked this question to people on our North Wing before, like, okay, X or Y, who do you take into Mordor? And sometimes it's serious and sometimes it's funny. I know Elrond said no, that this guy shouldn't go. I'm still going to say Glorfindel. There's nobody more well-suited to getting me through Mordor than Glorfindel if I can't take Sam. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go. We're going to have to add it to our list. We've got a nice little collection.
I like Claire's Drinking with Rosie Cotton. I like that a lot, actually. That's really good.
Because then Sam shows up. He's just on the other side of the room looking bashful.
Yeah, that's right. And if the problem is if I'm drinking with Rosie Cotton, Sam's going to be ticked. So maybe I don't.
But you could be his wingman. So so now you change your name. Like now it's like Alan, wingman of the Sam.
Wingman.
And then you become the hero. You become the hero of Sam's story. Sam may have carried Frodo, but you carried Sam to his marriage with Rosie Cotton.
I love it. That's great.
If we have fanfic people in the audience, please make us a fanfic
sure we do.
of Alan doing that.
Oh, that's good stuff. Those are fun questions. I might have to borrow those for another North Wing sometime.
I feel like, Trip says Pound Town, and I think that people in the context, people understand that he means drinking, but just in case anyone did not get
it
the
took
context,
me a second
Pound
too. So I'm like,
Town
wait a minute,
means
I don't know that I can answer
drinks.
that. Yeah.
Well, I believe Chris Vicario found it thoroughly confusing, and
I bet. Yeah.
and he was like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Well, I think we might mean something different." But
I think you might. Bagel Goose, by the way, I'm almost 100% with you. I literally thought about Beleg for each of the three. Beleg Cuthalion, yes.
So I know one of your 3 podcasts involved Rings of Power, and we decided we're gonna do a Rings of Power podcast. So it would give Nick and I a reason to hang out on live streams with people.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
And like, what would make season 2 so awesome? Like where your brain breaks just if it happens. Like if you have a little a bingo card, it's just like, auto bingo. If this goes down, then we'll see if Nick can guess mine, because I'm pretty confident he has a.
In the meantime, I just got to give a shout out to Laura Sherman's answer about Luthien to Mordor. Of course, Sauron's going to be not her again. I mean, yeah, that would be a good answer. You're watching me squirm, Katie, because for a brief moment I forgot the question. But that would be your cue, Trip, to remind me, because I got totally thrown by Luthien to Mordor.
Well, I don't know what would make you go wild in season 2
for season 2
of Rings of Power.
Maybe that's why I forgot, because it was really going to be hard to answer that question. I don't know that they can write themselves out of the hole in which they have dug themselves. That's the challenge. I hoped, I really, really desperately hoped that the last season, or the last episode of season 1, was going to reveal that the real Gil-galad was tied up in a cave somewhere and Sauron was wearing a Gil-galad meat suit. That would have been the only way to fix the Mithranium story, and the way to fix, well, a lot of things that were wrong. There's a lot of still potential, though. I'm not here to bash it. I didn't give it a very high grade because as season 1 stands on its own, it didn't really earn a very high grade. A lot of great content.
Right?
I think I gave it a C-, but primarily because of the writing, because the acting was really good. The casting was spot on. The cinematography, the music, some of the visual effects were a little off. I still think that like 20-year-old wargs look better than the warg in season 1.
I agree with that.
As we called it, the Chihuahua warg. It was just a little funky. But the writing was really the flaw. And I really, really struggled with many of the way the threads were going. In fairness, I thought the Elrond Durin thread was fantastic. That storyline doesn't need to do anything different than it's already doing. Just more decent, please. Let's see. What could they do to make it just knock it out of the park? Automatic win.
Well, the Elrond, you know what he's asking for in season 2?
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
Well played. Well played. I love that. I really need to see men's thirst for immortality be their drive, not everything else. There's really not been enough of that. It felt all along like, okay, I mean, yeah, you can make the connection, but it was never spelled out for you that, yeah, we want to live forever, right? We want to defeat immortality, or, we want to gain immortality. So they need to beef that up. That would be a big start, number 1. Then I think they've got to fix the Sauron Halbrand thing. I mean, I know mystery box is TV. There's nothing we can do about that. But now that we've got that revealed, they need to make it a really, really good storyline, and they can. They can salvage that line. I'm not sure that there is a magic bullet. Not a single one, at least. I wish there was. I think there's several things that they would need to really improved to make it feel like they can knock it out. The thing is, though, I still think they can. I'm optimistic that they can turn it around. I don't know, though, how much of an effect the writer's strike will have had on that.
Well, maybe they would just have to hire Tolkien nerds that aren't professional writers.
There you go. I'm not a member of any union. I'll just scab it up. No, I'm.
Yeah, or
we're supporting SAG-AFTRA on their strike as well. So yeah,
I know. Well, I know we have another one started. The next session's coming soon, Nick. So we have to wrap up. But
oh my goodness, yeah. I
know that I'm just really looking forward to more Waldrick. I feel like he was, like you've said to yourself for years, looking at all those Middle Earth maps, you're like, who was it that built Mount Doom? Like, what is the source of Mordor? Who made it? #Waldred did. And I mean, he's just ready to level up. Who knows what's going to go down? Like, if we aren't going to, take your advice and remedy it and get internal consistency and try to right the ship, I want Waldrig, I want him to go super bad this year, and then in season 3 he breaks good, and then all of a sudden,
you don't want him to be one of the Nazgul. You don't want him to be one of the 9.
No, because they die. I want Waldrig to be immortal. He's just so good because, I mean, if you're just sour, like he just is he's so gangster. Like
he is gangster. That's true. Yeah.
I'm also ready for Waldrick to be counted among, Arendelle and Baron. We need him in the top men.
And you, Frodo, shall be counted among the elf friends, Turin and Baron and Waldrick.
I know. I spent about 4 or 5 episodes convinced that Daddy Doran was a ghost, and because no one else had talked to him and things,
right?
And it was really depressing when he was alive.
When he was actually real,
yeah. I was like, nah, they aren't alive at the same time. He's just a ghost, and then he's going to put the crown on. It's like it lives within him, like Star Wars Episode 9 and Rey, but it's Doran's.
So, Alan, we've had an awesome time with you, but before we have, it's been way too much fun. But and I didn't really give you a proper intro. But a lot of people, so I apologize for that. But I think a lot of people on our chat know who the Prancing Pony is, who you are. But tell us if there, we probably do have some new people from Trip. So tell us, what projects you got coming down the line, what people should look forward to, where people can find you.
Absolutely.
Because people need more
the Prancing Pony podcast is the primary thing. I've been doing that now 7 seasons. Started in 2016. We got 301 episodes. Well, 301 drops this Sunday is the last episode of season 7. So we've already gone through the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and the first 5 books of Lord of the Rings. So we've got 1 more book in Lord of the Rings, and then a season or 2 of additional Legendarium, a season or 2 of non-Legendarium, and then probably 2 seasons of the Silmarillion as we go back kind of complete full circle. I've recently started Today's Tolkien Times, which is a short format, thank God, show that I do Monday through Saturday, and it's on YouTube as well as on audio podcasts. You can find that everywhere. At Tolkien Times is on social media handle, just like at Prancing Pony Pod is social media for Prancing Pony Podcast. We also do Rings of Power wrap-up. Of course, that's really in hiatus and has been since the show is on hiatus. We'll probably pick it back up with a few weeks to go, kind of bring up whatever hype, we'll analyze a trailer or whatever if it comes out.
If you need a Waldred fanboy, just let me know.
I think we might need that.
I've got a whole host of Waldred memes I've been working on.
I love it.
And
we'll have to talk about that for sure.
Yeah, I got a whole soundboard of Waldrick just ready to go.
Nice.
So
those are the 3 podcasts. Sean Marchese and I, the host, my co-host for the first 6 years of the Prancing Pony Podcast, he and I have just finished writing a book called Why We Love Middle Earth. That's going to come out in September. It is very much a fan-friendly. Yeah, we want it to be okay for people who are total geeked out like us to be able to read it and enjoy it, but mostly it's written for newer fans who are learning what about the books, in what order should I read them, what's important about them. There's a whole section on adaptations. There's a whole section on the fandom itself, things like fan organizations and moots and conferences, Tolkien studies, the languages. I think I already said that. A number of other things that are all there. And of course, we're already 20,000 words into a sequel that we had to cut because the book already reached 100,000 words. So the chapter on adaptations that included video games, probably 12,000 words. That had to be shelved for the sequel.
Rad.
but that's okay because there'll be more video games then that don't suck like Gollum.
Amen, sir. Amen.
I mean, my very first live streaming gaming experience was playing Gollum for 3 hours and dying incessantly and cursing the developers of a really, really bad game. But oh well, so be it.
Awesome. Well, what I hear about the book is that it's coming out in the fall. Perfect time for all the Tolkien super nerds to give it to all their friends for in the holidays.
It will come out in time for Hobbit Day.
Yeah. And so, Alan, it's been a blast.
Thank you.
I think you deserve some Horn of Gondor. Oh yeah,
I love that. Now, is that from the Bakshi film?
No, that's the Fellowship of the Ring. That's actually the Horn of Boromir.
I was wondering, but repeated. Yeah.
Well, it's multiple buttons so that I can do it like an air horn. Because when you get an air horn, and I was like, how do you Middle Earth the air horn?
Turn Boromir's horn into a vuvuzela. That's what we need to. That's what we need to do.
Oh, so true.
Yeah. No annoying things. All right. Thanks for having me, guys. It was really a lot of fun. I'm glad that I could do this because the rest of your people are all deadly serious academics. And I'm the only one without a PhD, THD, MDiv, or those other things. A Juris Doctorate doesn't count. It always makes fun of lawyers. So the fact that I have one is irrelevant. So,
well, I've met worse lawyers, I promise.
I hope so. Well, they're all practicing. I'm not, so that counts.
All of you on the stream, remember, you want to go click the link to the other sessions. That way you can find them after. Don't just stay here. Go click the link to the next one, which will be starting very soon. So awesome. Peace out.
Thanks again, guys. And thank you, everybody attending. Appreciate it.